Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 4. We're going to be doing our season preview today. We're going to go team by team based on Dynasty Daddy's percentage chance to make the playoffs, starting at the bottom and working our way up to number 1. For those unfamiliar, Dynasty Daddy is a league evaluator that does power rankings and uses a tier system. The teams can be ranked anywhere from contender all the way down to trust the process, which is the lowest tier, classified as a rebuilding team. There's different levels in between. Our league is actually grouped up into just 3 tiers, those being contender, frisky, and then trust the process is only one team in our league. Coming in at number 12 is GeorgiaMike, managing H&H Bagels.
Great news. Yeah, the strike's been settled. I'm going back to work.
What strike? H&H Bagels, that's where I worked.
You worked? Bagels?
With a projected record of 6-22 and a less than 1% chance to make the playoffs, according to Dynasty Daddy. He's in the Trust the Process tier, which is defined as a rebuilding tier when there is one clear rebuilding team in the league.
Cover your ears, Philadelphia fans. I know they don't want to hear anything about Trust the Process.
They probably don't want to hear from a Celtics fan right now anyways, not after last season in the playoffs. So when we get to GeorgiaMike's team, there's a couple areas that stand out. First of all, he's number 1 in draft capital, according to the rankings, featuring he's got 3 firsts in the 2024 draft, 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and his own 4th. Quite the haul at the draft there.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're looking for when you're in this Trust the Process tier. Clearly leaning into the rebuild as you should, collecting as much draft capital as you can.
His second highest position ranking is 5th ranked wide receiver room. We got Drake London, Quentin Johnston, Michael Pittman, Jamison Williams, Jaden Reed, Justin Ross, Raheed Sheed. All these guys are under 25. All of them are either young and unproven, as in they're rookies now, or are in their 2nd or 3rd year at most. I think Pittman might be going into his 4th, but even he's 25. It's designed to look towards the future as he manages to get the rest of his team up to just.
He's really done a good job redistributing what little assets he inherited in this orphan that he took over.
Yeah, we should note that most of the damage done to this team is not the fault of GeorgiaMike. He took over an awful situation and has done so far an admirable job trying to turn it around and get this team back on track.
This roster was pretty much dead last in the league as far as team value is concerned. Didn't have picks, didn't have real promising assets at almost any position. He's done well to already turn around his wide receiver room. He's got a top 5 ranked receiving room in the league already.
And most importantly, he's got your favorite player ever, Denzel Mims, on the roster still.
Only because he refuses to trade him back to me.
So that's a smart man right there. The rest of the team outside of the wide receiver room ranks 9 at tight end, 12 and 12 at QB and running back. There's not a ton to comment on outside of a couple of rookies. We got Michael Mayer at tight end, who's promising. We got Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, who's promising. There's not a ton of other depth at either one of those positions, but for a rebuilding team, that's not where you really need to be investing your value early on until you're ready to compete.
The one advantage he has over the rest of us as being the only clearly rebuilding team is he can collect a lot of these backup quarterbacks, backup running backs, guys that are most likely going to score 0 every week. It doesn't hurt his team. The less points he scores, the better for him. He's trying to get the top pick in the draft next year. He's not trying to score points. He can take advantage and hold these guys when the rest of us really can't afford to have that many weekly 0s in a best ball league if we're trying to be competitive. So what he can do is scoop up all of these players that may have value at some point. If they do, great. He can flip them for more picks. The only guy he's really holding with any value at quarterback or running back is Jahmyr Gibbs, which makes sense. You don't want to have a ton of your team value locked up at running back when you're looking at a longer term rebuild. But Gibbs is one of the safest assets you can hope for at running back. He was an early pick. He gets a lot of his points through receiving work. As far as holding value in running back, that's about as safe an asset as you can hope for.
Yeah, and you mentioned holding on to those backups. At quarterback, he's holding on to Zach Wilson, Malik Willis, Bailey Zappi, Tyler Huntley, Skylar Thompson, Kyle Allen. There's a lot of backups there.
That's Pro Bowl Tyler Huntley to you.
Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley, that's true. He's got all these guys that are backups, and one injury pushes them up a depth chart and gets them into the starting roster. He can easily flip that for additional draft capital because none of those guys are going to be long-term solutions if they do make it.
Yeah, and we've seen in the last couple of years backups that get thrust into starting roles go for, later picks. It's definitely something that happens in this league, and it's a good strategy that you really can only pull off if you're in this position.
At number 11, we have BiggBiscuits managing Kyle Trask.
2nd and 8. Trask. Wobbler to the end zone, and he throws his 3rd pick of the first quarter.
With a projected 9-19 record and a 4% chance to make the playoffs. You don't get a clip. You don't have a good enough name.
Big's team is the beginning of our frisky tier. The next couple of teams are all fringe playoff teams. Could be last team in or first team out kind of teams. These are teams where one or two things break right and they're a playoff team. One or two things break wrong and they're looking at potentially the 102 in the draft.
And we should note, our league is actually grouped into just 3 tiers. There are 3 other tiers that, for whatever reason, none of our teams happen to fall into. So you're going to hear a lot of frisky, and then after frisky, we get to the contender tier. But there are other tiers on this site that, for whatever reason, our league doesn't fall into.
Surprisingly, for a Dynasty League that's now several years in, the talent distribution is still fairly even. Generally, once you get a couple of years in, you start to see teams really emerge as super teams or teams that are just bereft of assets. And we really don't have anybody that qualifies in the former and only one in the latter.
Good job as a league on the whole. Position by position, Big's team ranks 3rd in value at the running back, wide receiver, and draft capital positions. So let's start with the running backs here. It's a fairly strong and, again, fairly young running back room. At the top, you're featuring guys Javonte Williams, James Cook, Devon A-Chain, Brian Robinson. A lot of young names there, a lot of talented names there. He's got some depth at the position as well with other guys. I'm not sure how we can have a team that's got a running back rank of 3 or wide receiver rank of 3 be ranked this low. That's why he's in the frisky tier.
He's got a lot of value on his roster, but maybe not a lot of potential points this year. What Big is really going for is not a complete rebuild. It's more like a soft reset where he's just kind of pushing into next year. He has accumulated a lot of value, including at running back, which is not normally where you're going to put a lot of your team value if you're looking at a multi-year rebuild. But he's really not. He's going to push his chips into next year. Javonte probably not going to have a monster season coming off of a major injury, but he's going to be a big time factor next year. James Cook, we're going to see if he can handle the full load for the first time since probably high school for him. A-Chain's a rookie. Kendre Miller's a rookie. A lot of his depth pieces are rookies. And then he's got the Robinson and Gibson combination in Washington. He's holding a lot of value. It's just we're not sure how many actual points we're going to get out of these guys this season.
It's a good point that there's a lot of unproven there as well. We haven't necessarily seen the actual production from Cook and A-Chain yet. Moving over to the wide receivers, we've got a couple of guys at the top. DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers are head and shoulders above the rest of the room, but this room features a lot of depth, and depth is what you want in this style of league. There's half a dozen guys here who could every week make a roster on any team in this league.
Agreed. And again, it's similar to the running back group where we have DK. We know what we're going to get from DK. But the rest of these guys, we got a lot of rookies: Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt, Tank Dell, Cedric Wilson, Michael Wilson, Trey Palmer. We don't know what we're going to get from these guys. We know they're going to play. We don't know how much production we're going to get, but they hold a lot of dynasty value. And then even some of the bounce back candidates like all of the Moores, Elijah Moore, Sky Moore, Rondell Moore. We're hoping for bounce backs from them. I know Big's hoping for bounce backs from them, but we don't know exactly what kind of production we're going to get. It's possible they recapture their former dynasty glory. It's also possible they faceplant and turn to dust.
If I recall correctly, he has PFF's top ranked wide receiver in Jalen Naylor. Was that top ranked or top 5 ranked?
He's number one. He just got him stashed on his bench for a rainy day.
Aside, I really wonder if he actually keeps him on the roster come the regular season there.
I'm guessing he's going to get cut down. Does he want to hold the Vikings fourth or fifth receiver? Probably not.
That I couldn't tell you.
He's got a lot of depth, like you said. This is how you want to build a best ball wide receiver room. You just want as many potential contributors as possible. He's got 15 guys here who are going to play every week. He just needs a couple of them to run into a few receptions, maybe a touchdown here or there to get into his lineup.
Yep. And moving over to the draft capital side of things, rank of 3 for draft capital, has a extra second round pick in the 2024 draft and all of his other picks intact. That right there is enough to bump you up above pretty much every other team except for GeorgiaMike and you.
He's collected a couple of extra picks here and there. I'd imagine if it doesn't start well, he'll probably start to pick up some more picks as the season goes on.
The hang-ups for his roster right now come at the quarterback position and the tight end position. Quarterback, his number one guy is Kyler Murray, and obviously coming back off the ACL, we don't know if and when we're going to see him. But outside of that, he still actually has a couple of viable starters in Ridder and Mayfield. Not exactly guys that are going to light up the world, but they're going to go out there and put up some points.
He's built very similarly at almost every spot. He's got his anchor, Kyler Murray, who may or may not give him much this year. And then he's got a couple of unproven young guys, Ridder, Will Levis. We'll see if he gets any playing time this year. Baker and Trask, one of those guys who's going to start for Tampa Bay. Even Toon still got a shot to win that starting quarterback job in Arizona. So it's possible he ends up with multiple starters.
Or Dobbs at this point.
Or Dobbs as well. It's one of the first things we assess is the quarterback depth. In a best ball superflex, you want to have at least 3 starting quarterbacks. You can get away with less, but if you want to be a true contender, you're probably going to need at least 3 to make it through the season. So it's possible he has that. It's also possible that he ends up with no starting quarterbacks. So that's why he's in this frisky tier. He's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of value. We just don't know what kind of production we're going to get yet.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that hinges on when Kyler comes back, and right now there's no way to know. If he needs to float 3 weeks on Ridder and Mayfield, that's not really that big of a problem. If he needs to float 2 months on them, that's going to be a problem.
Much the same way at tight end, he's got 3 young guys, including 2 rookies. Generally, we're not expecting much production from rookies, but it looks like Sam Laporta and Luke Musgrave have already locked up the tight end 1 roles for their respective teams and could factor as high as the number 2 option in each team's passing game.
Yeah, they're 2 clearly talented players, but the fantasy hit rate on rookie tight ends is just so incredibly low. It would make me nervous going into the season like that. But it does look like you said he's doing the soft reset, looking forward to next year. You know, he'll have those guys with the year under their belt, and McBride is his 3rd tight end with 2 years under his belt. Should be a little bit more comfortable going forward.
He's set his team up well to be somewhat competitive this year if things break right. And if not, he's got a lot of young talent looking forward to next year.
All right, one last thing before we move on from Big's team. Outside of the clearly rebuilding GeorgiaMike, he is the only team in our league who has not traded a single one of his 2024 picks. What the heck, dude? Get on it. Come on. Join the party. Coming in at number 10 is Benign Rug managing Mr. Marbles.
Kramer, if I'm gonna live over there, you gotta take some of this stuff out. I mean, this thing is really freaking me out. I feel like it's gonna come to life in the middle of the night and kill me.
What, Mr. Marbles? He's harmless.
Hello? Is somebody there? Mr. Marbles?
With a projected 10-18 record and a 6% chance to make the playoffs. Now, this is another one that falls into the frisky category, according to our source here, Dynasty Daddy. The spot to highlight on this team is the wide receiver value, rank of number 5, where we have some pretty good young talent. We see Jordan Addison from this year's draft, Christian Watson from last year's draft, Jerry Jeudy, Deontay Johnson, both fairly young as well. It's a solid wide receiver group that he's built.
I agree with you that wide receiver is probably the strength of this team value-wise. He's got the young upper tier receivers you named. He's got a couple of veteran contributors, guys like Wandell when he's back, Gallup, Curtis Samuel, even Josh Palmer. who right now is still fighting for that ancillary role in the Chargers passing game. He's got some talent here up in the wide receiver room, at least.
All right, and not ranking quite as highly, but still having a lot of young potential is his quarterback room. We saw him draft Bryce Young early on in this year's draft, pair with Russell Wilson and Jimmy Garoppolo. So we've got 3 starters there, which is what you're looking for at quarterback, and the unknown of what Bryce Young will bring to the table both this year and going into the future.
Like you said, he's got the 3 starting quarterbacks. That's kind of the bare minimum bar you're looking at in a super flex best ball league. You want to make sure you have at least 3 starters if you want to be a true competitive team. And he's got 3 starters as of now. You know, he's got Bryce Young, he's got Russell Wilson, he's got Jimmy Garoppolo. The reason he's in the frisky tier and maybe not the true contender tier is the level of expectation on these quarterbacks. Bryce Young is a rookie, albeit the number 1 overall pick. He doesn't have the greatest weapons around him right now. Rookies always come with question marks. He's got Russell Wilson, new coach, new optimism, but coming off a very shaky year last year. And Jimmy Garoppolo, who is, despite your love for him, perpetually injured. Also going to a Raiders team that's really struggled to produce any offense outside of Josh Jacobs recently, pretty much since Josh McDaniel, the offensive mastermind, has been there.
Yeah, it hasn't been a great look in Las Vegas for the, was he a second, third year coach now? Whatever he is.
However many years he's been there, it's been too long.
Too many. A lot of his team and as you say, his level of friskiness and how Bryce Young performs for fantasy, not necessarily obviously for how he performs in real life. Even with questionable weapons, he still put up good enough fantasy numbers with his other assets at quarterback to let him sneak into the back end of things, but it's an uphill battle.
Yeah, that's how it is with the frisky teams, right? It could go either way. There's a path either direction. If all these guys perform well, Bryce Young plays like the 101, Russell Wilson bounces back to pre-Denver Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo can stay on the field. He's been productive when he's on the field, right? It's just a matter of keeping him upright. Then you have a fringe playoff team with this quarterback room.
Interesting way this looks to me is I see young teams, a young team at wide receiver, young talent with Young at quarterback, but then I look at this running back room and I see age. I see Aaron Jones, James Conner, Dalvin Cook, all up there. Deonta Foreman's on his 3rd or 4th team, but he's not an old guy like they are, but he's not young by any means. And then even the lower end guys like Kareem Hunt and Chase Edmonds, I'm just seeing a lot of age in this running back room, which is not the worst thing because they're all still pretty secure in their roles and in their jobs, but there's not a ton of upside there. You're not likely to have any breakouts. And that running back room would be one where if the season doesn't go your way, we're going to see some assets being sold off.
This is a running back room on a win now, sold everything to win this year type of team. Productive vets. Doesn't look good on keep trade cuts team value or a dynasty daddy's got him ranked 10th out of 12 teams for running back value. But these guys are going to score points. That's the reason another reason why he's in this frisky tier. If these vets have another productive season like they've had historically, they're all getting close to that age cliff. But if they can keep producing like they have been producing, this is a very competitive running back room. I don't care what the value says. These guys are going to score points.
Yeah, I agree. There's not a ton of depth, but the guys that are there are solid.
And like you said, if things go bad, guess what? Contenders are going to come calling for these pieces. These are the perfect guys to be able to sell and recoup some draft picks or younger players to restock.
You don't have to say contenders. You can just say You can just
me. I will come. I will come calling for all of these players.
So that leaves us with the tight ends and the draft capital. Draft capital rank is number 8, right around the middle of the pack. Just missing a 2nd round pick next year, which I mean it's unfortunate to be missing a 2nd round pick, but it's not going to sink your draft class or anything like that. The tight ends, the 2 that are listed as the starters by Dynasty Daddy are Hunter Henry and Tyler Conklin. Not young guys, but not as far as tight ends go super old. They're both kind of lower end options, I would say. And behind Henry and Conklin, you've got a couple of young guys with Ruckert, who was a pick last year, and Latu, who was a pick this year. I mean, we could see those guys develop and turn into something, and same with Cole Turner. The rest of it, you got guys like Uzoma, Mo Alley Cox, Adam Troutman, just some vets who in our league need to be rostered, but aren't really going to do a whole heck of a lot for you week to week.
Yeah, the one good thing is he has a lot of bodies, right? Maybe not guys that we're projecting to have big seasons statistically, but you never know. I mean, Henry's put up good seasons in the past. He has the entire Jets tight end room between Conklin, Uzama, and Rucker. Somebody's going to score points there. We know Rodgers doesn't shy away from tight ends. Even guys like Troutman is going to get heavy playing time. Cole Turner could step in if Logan Thomas can't get healthy. So he's got options. I'm not sure how many points we're going to get on a consistent week-to-week basis, but he's got enough options here that he just needs one or two out of these 15 guys he has rostered to have productive weeks and get in his lineup.
It's a fair point. I didn't even notice until you pointed it out that he's got the entire Jets room on lockdown, which, while it's good because you're basically securing those points with a quarterback, as you said, with Rodgers, who will target the tight end, but that's another spot where you're limiting your overall upside.
Yeah, there's a reason Dynasty Daddy has him ranked 11th out of 12 in tight end value.
And for draft capital, Dynasty Daddy's got him ranked at 8th overall in the league, which is, middle of the pack there. The class is mostly intact. He's got an extra 3rd round pick, but he's missing his 2nd round pick. A little bit extra capital later on, but mostly just standard middle of the pack stuff.
Yeah, he's not completely devoid of draft capital. Again, one of the things we're looking for if a team's trying to be a true competitor, if you don't have the depth or the top end talent, at least if you have the draft picks, you can go and get fill-in starters should the season go well and he finds himself in the true contender ranks.
At number 9, we have Criddle, managing Soup Guy.
This guy makes the best soup in the city, Jerry. The best. You know what they call him? Soup Nazi.
You know something? No soup for you. Come back 1 year.
With a projected 11-17 record and an 11% chance to make the playoffs. This is another one in our frisky tier. And looking at Criddle's team, the clear top position group is his quarterbacks. He's got Jalen Hurts, who is one of the absolute top quarterbacks in the league. He's got CJ Stroud, young rookie coming in. Sam Howell, named the starter. You know me, I'm a Howell fan. And Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who apparently just beat out Dobbs for the backup job in Cleveland. Jalen Hurts, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, gives him the leeway to make other choices with his other quarterbacks. And making the choice of CJ Stroud was not a difficult one in this year's draft. He dropped to him at 5, which was a great spot to pick up a young starter in the Superflex league. But it affords him that chance with Howell, who is an unproven asset, starting for a new offensive coach in that system with a head coach who is questionable to remain there in the future.
Exactly. There's a lot of risk involved when Sam Howell is your quarterback too. But when you can pick up a guy like CJ Stroud, who's locked in based on his draft capital, he's going to have a long leash. He's going to start for a while. Good or not, he's going to be there. That pushes Sam Howell down to quarterback 3, which is why his room is ranked so highly now. He's got the anchor in Jalen Hurts, and he's got 2 other locked in starters, at least for this season.
All right, his second highest ranked position group is actually his draft capital. He's ranked at number 4. Looking at it now, he's got an extra 4th round pick in the 2024 draft, which bumps him up a little bit over some other teams. Nothing crazy there, but still nice to have all of your rounds intact.
When you're a fringe playoff team like he is in this frisky tier, it's always helpful to have some extra ammo in case you need to go and buy pieces during the season.
Looking at the running back room, we have Christian McCaffrey at the top, which is obviously the best anchor to have at the position. Followed up with David Montgomery, newly moving over to fill the Jamal Williams role from last year in the Detroit offense, and Kenneth Gainwell in that uncertain Eagles backfield. Even beyond that, there's some depth pieces like Zeke Elliott, Evan Hull, Chuba Hubbard. Clearly, we've got a top end at this position with McCaffrey being so much more valuable than everyone else, but there are other players in here who are going to score points, who are going to put up some numbers that will get them into the lineup on a week-to-week basis.
This running back room really fits in with the theme of the rest of this roster, where you have a very kind of stars and scrubs approach almost. You got the elite in Christian McCaffrey, who's arguably the running back 1, at least from a redraft perspective. And then you have some other guys who are contributors, but not anyone else nearly to that level. Got a decent amount of depth for a team that wants to contend. McCaffrey is really the key here.
Yeah, it's similar to the hero running back strategy in redraft, where you have that one guy and then you'll just hope to fill in around the edges. But unlike in redraft, where we have the best ball format here, you can fill in around the edges as you get lucky.
Having a bunch of guys who are expected to have some kind of weekly role definitely helps in a best ball format. You don't have to pick and choose which one to start each week. Whichever one of them happens to fall into the end zone or get a couple of catches and can get into your lineup.
Moving over to the wide receiver room, we've got another group of young, talented players here, starting off with Chris Olave at the top, clearly the number one. And then we have Jahan Dotson, Jonathan Mingo, Marvin Mims, all in their first or second year. Kadarius Toney, who knows if he's going to play again, but he's with Patrick Mahomes if he does. Juju Smith-Schuster, starting off with a new team in New England, but still solid production pretty much every year. And then some solid depth pieces in Boyd, Jefferson, Devontae Parker. Just a nice list here at wide receiver, in my opinion.
It's a good group, especially in a best ball. A lot of these guys on the bottom of the roster, Parker, Tutu Atwell, Van Jefferson, Tyler Boyd, guys like that, you don't really want in a lineup league. They're kind of roster cloggers. You never know when to start them. And if you do start them, usually you're not happy about it. But in a best ball, they just sit on your roster, and if they pop, then they get in your lineup. If Tutu Atwell catches a deep pass or Van Jefferson catches a long touchdown, all of a sudden they made your starting lineup and they can help you get a win. But the top end is really where the talent is, and it's a very young group, all first or second year players, guys that we're expecting big things from this year. Olave had a monster rookie season. Dotson was highly productive. Mingo's wide open situation as a top 35 pick in the draft. Those are generally the receivers that hit as rookies. And there's a new coaching staff, new quarterback, unsettled target hierarchy. He's going to walk into a starting role. He could easily establish himself as the alpha there. He's certainly got the physical traits to do it. And then my guy, Marvin Mims, after Judy's injury, now has an even clearer path to early season production.
Yeah, the receivers are dropping like flies in Denver.
Just making way for Marvin Mims, the silent assassin. That's his nickname now. FYI.
Oh, right now?
Yeah, I just created that right now.
All right, I'll let him know. We'll send him an email.
The depth chart assassin.
Well, I'm sure
that one might already be taken.
I'm sure he's listening, so you know.
I hope he's not listening. I'll fear for my life or my ACLs.
This is one of those situations where you find out that a player has a nickname and you're like, what? I've never heard that. What show is it that always brings up that Tom Brady's nickname on PFF is listed as like the Pharaoh or something like that? Football Reference or something like that? I'm Googling Tom Brady the Pharaoh. Yeah, it's Pro Football Reference. That's what it was, not PFF. Looking at Criddle's tight end room, it ranks 7 according to Dynasty Daddy, with George Kittle and Juwan Johnson as the starters, Irv Smith, Jelani Woods, and Will Dissly filling out the bench spots. Similar to quarterback, the wide receiver, the running back room, we have one guy who's a tier above everybody else with George Kittle. Obviously one of the most dynamic guys in the league, but not super consistent. Juwan Johnson basically burst onto the scene with a lot of touchdowns. We'll see if he can repeat that. And Irv Smith, Jelani Woods, Will Dissly. There's some good bodies there. Nice depth pieces, guys you need, guys that'll make a lineup. For the record, I'm still not over the fact that I managed to identify and draft Juwan Johnson, hold on to him for a year, and then drop him days before he started breaking out, essentially. That's a tough one.
This room follows the same build he has in his other position groups. He's got the top tier asset in George Kittle, and then he's got a couple of other guys behind. He's got some depth, but probably not guys that you really want to be relying on a week-to-week basis. Overall, it's a good enough group, especially in this league where there's not a ton of tight end depth on anyone's roster. It's enough where he can get by.
Yeah, he's solidly middle class in tight end.
Exactly.
At number 8, we have Flea Flickers managing the Big Salad.
A big salad?
What big salad? I'm going to the coffee shop.
Well, they have big salads.
I've never seen a big salad.
They have big salad.
With a projected record of 11-17 and an 11% chance to make the playoffs. Same win projections and percentage chance to make the playoffs as Criddle, but a much different team construction. Same tier here in the frisky tier still. Well, looking at the team, we see a team that's constructed a little bit differently than we've seen thus far. Flea's main strength is her running back room, where she just drafted and traded up to get Bijan Robinson at number 1 overall in this last year's rookie draft. Obviously, he's currently the number 1 ranked dynasty running back across the board, so that's certainly a nice asset to have. Also on the roster, Jonathan Taylor and Travis Etienne, who are both fairly high up in the rankings as well. Obviously, a little bit of uncertainty with Taylor at the moment, but hopefully that gets resolved soon. Some more depth pieces in there: Singletary, Deion Jackson, Jeff Wilson. A solid running back room overall.
It's a very top-heavy running back group. I think that's kind of the theme for her roster. She has very good starters and then not much depth behind them. That's why she's in this frisky tier. If everybody stays healthy and produces like we think, it's going to be a very good team. She struggles with injuries or ineffectiveness. She may struggle to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. The top-heavy nature of this roster is fairly evident once you look across the board. But at that running back position, it does give you a weekly advantage over pretty much every other team in the league when you're rolling out Bijan Robinson and then Jonathan Taylor as your number 2.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for most teams to match Bijan, Taylor, and Travis Etienne as your running back 3.
And just for curiosity, who would you classify as your running back 3?
Let me take a quick peek at my roster. According to Dynasty Daddy, it would be Jalen Warren, current backup running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
They put him right in that ETN tier, right next to him.
Hey, close enough.
The other position of strength that Flea has here is her tight end room, where, again, the starters are great compared to the rest of what most teams are rolling out, where she's got TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller as her 2 starters. Great options, both of them, especially in PPR, especially with that tight end premium extra point bonus. After that, it falls off a cliff quickly. Her number 3 is Parham. You got Tommy Tremble, Quintoriano, and then Josh Oliver. So really, outside of Hawkinson and Waller, you're not looking at much production.
She's going to live and die on a weekly basis on what Hawkinson and Waller bring her. She's not going to get much from the rest of the group. The good news is Hawkinson and Waller are 2 of the more productive tight ends and will be very high in the pecking order. Waller is probably going to be the focal point of the Giants' passing game. It's a pretty safe weekly floor, at least for these 2 guys.
So her quarterback room is completely reworked from what it looked like last year. She has 3 starters, none of whom were on the roster last year. Anthony Richardson, who was the number 2 overall pick in this year's rookie draft. Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford round out that room. Carr and Stafford, good, solid veteran presence, nice points on a weekly basis, as long as everyone's healthy. Carr hasn't had struggles with health, but Stafford obviously has. And Richardson, he's got a ceiling up there with just about anyone else in the league, but who knows how much of that will manifest in his rookie year.
What's the first thing we always look for if a team is trying to be competitive? We look at the quarterback group. We want to make sure they have at least 3 starters. She's got 3 locked in every week starters, as long as they're healthy. Richardson gives her a very high ceiling, and then Carr and Stafford give her a very safe floor.
Looking over to the wide receivers, we see Dynasty Daddy has a rank of 10 on this position group. Now, it's not completely bereft of talent because we've got guys like Devonta Smith, Marquise Brown, and Mike Evans at the top. But again, it follows the pattern where it's those top guys, and then there's not a ton of usable depth behind them. We see Smith, obviously, top 12 season last year, young, good wide receiver. Brown could be good. It really depends on how those backup quarterbacks function before Kyler returns. And then Mike Evans, we all know what we're getting there. It's 1,000 yards every year, but he's in what's probably the worst quarterback situation of his career. So is a little bit more of a question mark than normal. After that, you see Josh Downs, Khalil Shakir, A.T. Perry. There's some young guys there who could certainly emerge, but no one that's got an easy path to relevance.
I think Josh Downs is probably the most interesting guy here in this group. He's got the stack with Anthony Richardson, but the rest of these, you're kind of hoping that you get something week to week from them. Kendrick Bourne's going to play. He looks like he's going to be at least in 3 receiver sets in New England. Chenault's kind of down the depth chart, but it's an open depth chart. We don't know who's going to emerge there in Carolina. A.T. Perry looked great in the preseason, but he's pretty far down the depth chart. Same with these other guys, Sherfield, Raymond, Wilson. Losing Gage did not help. I know Gage is not a huge compiler, but losing any kind of potential production really hurts this thin wide receiver room.
Lastly, we look over at the draft capital. Next year's draft class, a little bare at the top. No first or second round picks. She does have a third round pick that she acquired just recently in a trade, and a fourth round pick as well. Not a lot at the top there. It is certainly going to hurt come draft next year.
I think the biggest problem is when you're a fringe competitor like she is, trying to maybe sneak into one of those last spots. You can certainly use the draft capital to buy a few extra pieces. She could use a few more potential starters here. She did manage to pick up a third and a fourth for selling a few backup quarterbacks in the last couple of days as of this recording. So there's still potential. She could buy a couple of pieces there. You're not going to get superstars with third and fourth round picks, but you could get somebody with the potential to fill in on a weekly basis, especially with the lack of depth here on this roster. And I'm sure if you'd ask her today, she would be happy to make that trade of next year's first for Bijan again.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure 11 of the 12 teams in the league would have been happy to make that trade. From here on out, all of the remaining teams are listed in the contender tier. The contender tier is defined as the tier for the teams that rank highest in the league. A contender has a strong chance of making the playoffs and a good chance to win it all. Now, obviously, we have 7 teams left, which means that not all of the 7 teams will make the playoffs, and obviously 7 of them can't win the title, but it's the highest probability that our eventual champion will come from one of these 7 teams. And the bottom of this tier starts off with some jerk whose name is Jarsal, and his team name is the Human Fund.
The Human Fund. Money for people.
Projected record of 15-13 with a 57% chance to make the playoffs. Looking at the positional ranks, tight end is the highest at number 2, but we're going to push on over to quarterback where the rank is number 3 and start there. That number 3 ranking is mostly on the back of Patrick Mahomes, who is the number 1 ranked dynasty player. Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins are filling out the starters at this position, and Trey Lance being the only backup on the roster.
I think this is the appropriate place to start because Patrick Mahomes almost single-handedly holds the key to your being a contender or not. If he delivers a normal Patrick Mahomes season, then you're probably going to get in the playoffs on his back. Doesn't hurt to have well above average starters in Dak, Prescott, and Kirk Cousins to round out the rest of the room.
I maintain that Kirk Cousins is criminally underrated. He's been a top 12 quarterback like 3 of the last 4 years.
Kirk's one of those guys that doesn't carry a ton of dynasty value because he's older and he's not exciting. He doesn't have the quarterback 1 overall upside, but he's solidly a back end quarterback 1 option year after year after year. He's got the best receiver in the league, arguably. It's a very good quarterback to have on your bench potentially week to week. Gives you a very high floor when you know your super flex spot is going to be filled by a quarterback 1 performance on most weeks, whether it's coming from Dak or Kirk.
Not an awful quarterback room for someone who spent a 3rd round startup pick on Trey Lance and then spent another 3rd round pick on him today. Moving over to tight end, we have a Dynasty Daddy rank of 2 at this position group. There's Pat Freiermuth and Evan Ingram as the starters, Isaiah Likely, Jake Ferguson, Daniel Bellinger, some decent depth pieces there, but it's really Freiermuth and Ingram, who were both top 12 options last year, I think top 8 options last year, that have propelled this ranking higher.
There's a reason you're number 2 overall in the entire league in tight end value. You've got a couple of good starters. There's not many teams that can boast 2 really top 10 options at tight end on the same roster. And then you've got a lot of good young contributors, likely Ferguson, Bellinger. Especially Ferguson, you've got that stack with Dak. Looks like he's going to step into that Schultz role, at least early on the season. Doesn't look like Schoonmaker is ready for primetime quite yet. So that's going to be good value for a guy you got real late in the draft.
And as our league mates may or may not know, I am a Giants fan, and I was thrilled with the way Bellinger played in his rookie year. I'm of two minds about the Waller acquisition. I'm thrilled to see the team go out and get a weapon, but I'm also so disappointed that Bellinger's not going to be the guy this year again.
This is why you should never root for a real NFL team. Only root for your fantasy players.
You just say that because you're still upset about the Chargers leaving San Diego.
I don't want to talk about it.
The running back room here is middle of the pack, number 7. I got J.K. Dobbins, Cam Akers, A.J. Dillon as the top 3 guys. Some depth pieces in there, Elijah Mitchell, Jamal Williams, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Really, the idea here was just get a bunch of guys and hope that something sticks from week to week.
I think it's a well-rounded group. You've got some talent on the top end. J.K. Dobbins is a great player when he's on the field. Akers is probably looking at a big workload this year. Dillon's been productive. Jamal Williams is always underrated. He always outperforms his value. And I think the young depth pieces are good too, right? You got a high upside handcuff in Elijah Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even your own handcuff, Gus Edwards. I think you've got a lot of depth, a lot of potential contributors. Maybe not a lot of high-end dynasty valued guys. Dobbins and Akers have kind of fallen off since the early promise with all of the injuries they've suffered through. But you're still looking at a good amount of production from this group.
Looking at the wide receiver room, a couple of guys at the top who are significantly higher value than the rest of the room. Jackson Smith-Njigba and Stephon Diggs up at the top. Then it's a similar thing to the running back room where it's a bunch of guys in those middle tiers and then the chaff at the bottom.
It's not the strongest receiver room in the league. I mean, you're ranked 9th out of 12 teams, right? So it's reflective in your dynasty value. But I think you have a lot of depth, a lot of potential contributors. That's really what you're looking for in a best ball. How many guys can potentially get in your lineup every week? You've got some top end talent, older guys, Diggs and Hopkins, who are going to carry most of the production. And then your biggest dynasty value asset is JSN. We're not sure how much he's going to actually contribute week to week, especially right now when it looks like he's going to miss at least some part of the early season. You got a lot of young guys. You got Dobbs and Pierce, Mechie, even Mooney. We're not sure what we're going to get from. He certainly showed a lot of promise his first couple of seasons. Last year was kind of a lost year for the entire offense outside of Justin Fields running. You got some older guys too. Michael Thomas, we're looking for a bounce back. Allen Robinson is another potential bounce back guy. A lot of potential contributors up and down the roster.
One of the things I do like about the wide receiver room is, like I said, there is some depth to it. There's not just one or two guys who are starter worthy. There's a lot of guys who, as you've used the phrase before, roster cloggers in other leagues, but in this type of league, it's just a few more guys that have a chance for a boom week.
It's definitely a best ball wide receiver room and a contending wide receiver room in best ball, I think. The team really, I know you're ranked right on the fringe of contender, just barely projected outside of the last playoff spot. One of the things we always look for is a strong quarterback room. You've got one of the strongest led by the quarterback one, and then you've got a lot of depth, a lot of potential contributors up and down. So if you have injuries here and there, you can kind of withstand and survive and continue to get points from other people and not have to worry about like Zacchaeus being in your weekly lineup.
Yeah, he didn't make it in very much last year. Rounding things out, the draft capital, rank of number 7. No second round pick in the 24 draft, but 2 third-round picks. Other than that, not much to talk about.
It's not nothing, right? You're kind of middle of the pack. You've got missing a pick, got an extra pick. What we're looking for here is depth and flexibility. You have the flexibility. You still have your first. If things go really wrong, you have your first. And you have a couple of extra mid-round picks if you need to buy players in season, maybe older contributing vets, guys that can kind of get you through the end of the season if you are in the top group of competitors.
That about wraps up my team. Coming in at number 6 is TheJuddernauts with Lord of the Idiots.
So please, a little respect. for I am Costanza, Lord of the Idiots. But suddenly, a new contender has emerged.
Looking at this team, his biggest strength is clearly the wide receiver room, highlighted by Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown at the top. Two guys that are young, stud wide receivers, consensus top 10 at the position. And following that up with Godwin, Kirk, Allen, Lockett, just a nice, solid grouping of mid-tier receivers who have consistently produced over the course of their careers.
It's a really good room. He's got the star power at the top. You've got productive veterans all through the depth chart. There's a reason that he's Dynasty Daddy's number 2 ranked wide receiver room. This is a very good receiver room, and it will carry his team.
Yeah, he was a playoff team last year and breakout seasons from Wilson, and I don't know if you'd call it the breakout season from Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he finished off the year before very strongly and kind of catapulted himself onto the scene then. But for a full season effort, last year was his real breakout campaign.
I think he just kind of solidified himself as a wide receiver 1 in everyone's eyes with a full season of production like that.
So the depth pieces here of Godwin, Kirk, Allen, and Lockett, as I said, they've got proven production, but looking at them this year, I think it's possible, not likely, but possible that at least a couple of those guys take a decent step back. Lockett and Allen are both looking at age-related concerns and young rookie wide receivers who are highly touted coming in and joining their squads. Godwin is saddled with a significant downgrade at quarterback, and Christian Kirk has Calvin Ridley coming in to take over that number 1 spot.
Are you suggesting that Baker Mayfield is not on the same level as Tom Brady?
I'm going to say he doesn't quite match up to the Pharaoh.
Sounds like blasphemy to me.
Well, I mean, blasphemy, we have Sun God in the room, there's something there. The Sun God and Godwin, there's some form of blasphemy is needed in this room.
I think it's fair to say that some of these guys have avenues for disappointment this year, but I think they're also solid, proven track record veterans, not guys that I'd really worry about, but it's possible they don't quite reach the ceiling that we've seen in the past.
It'll be interesting to watch as the year goes on how those veterans fare. His second highest ranked group is the running backs, highlighted by Najee Harris, Dameon Pierce, and Alvin Kamara at the top. Some solid depth pieces going down with Roshan, Rashad Penny, Damian Harris, Raheem Mostert, guys that'll definitely have good productive weeks, but won't be as consistent at the top.
I think it's a very good running back room as well. You have locked in production at the top with Harris and Pierce and Kamara once he's back from his suspension. And you have a lot of high upside bench guys. Roshan's working his way into rotation. We still don't know what the Eagles are going to do. Possible that Penny could end up taking the bulk of the early down carries in Philadelphia. We don't know what kind of role Damian Harris is going to play. It's possible he takes over the goal line duties on that team. Mostert is probably going to be the starter. You got a couple of young guys that are handcuffs, could potentially come into value later in the season. So he's got talent at the top, depth throughout. It's definitely a contending running back room.
Just to point out, Pierre Strong, who I just got traded to Cleveland, so he could be in line for another solid backup right there, who we've seen Cleveland use 2 running backs consistently. If Strong ends up as the number 2 guy there, he'll have more value than he does right now. After the running back, we'll move over to quarterback, take a look there. This one, fairly straightforward. Joe Burrow and Jordan Love are the 2 starters. A few backups on the roster as well, Winston, Locke, PJ Walker, and Andy Dalton. But it's all about Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow is going to carry this room. Clearly, he's an elite quarterback, elite producer. He's the reason that his quarterback rank is as high as it is. Love's a bit of a question mark. He is a locked-in starter. Really, any competition there, they're going to give him the year and see what he can do. He's looked good in the preseason. Looked good to me, at least. He also has some backups who have potential to work into starting jobs and would be worth playing if they do. Jameis has always produced whenever he's gotten the chance. Normally, you want to have at least 3 locked-in starters, but I think Judd did well to at least get a second one and make himself a competitive team. With just Burrow, it's really difficult to compete in Superflex. It's almost impossible to compete in Superflex with only one quarterback, even as good as Joe Burrow is. So getting that second one was really important. Ideally, you'd like to figure out a way to get a third. Maybe that opportunity will come up during the season.
Yeah, we'll see as teams, drop out of the playoff race. Maybe there'll be a veteran available for the right price. Speaking of getting love on the roster, to do that, he sent out his first-round pick in 2024. So looking over at the draft capital, it actually isn't as bad as you'd think for a team that doesn't control their own first-rounder, because he's got 2 additional second-rounders in addition to his own. So the draft capital rank is actually 6, right in the middle of the league, right at the median there.
Those 3 seconds will definitely help if he needs to buy something in season, potentially another quarterback, or to shore up any other positions of need that arise during the season. It's an underrated aspect when you're looking at potential contending teams, is having some kind of draft flexibility in order to make moves during the season and be able to bring in reinforcements when necessary, because injuries will happen. It's going to happen to everybody. Nobody makes it through the season unscathed.
The one remaining position that we haven't discussed here is the tight end room, and that's the real Achilles heel of Judd's team here. Looking at it, he's got the tight end rank of 12 according to Dynasty Daddy, which means last in the league. Only a couple legitimate starters, Dawson Knox, Kate Otten, Hayden Hurst. There's Taysom Hill, who's, I guess he's a tight end. He certainly puts up some decent production numbers, but it's not your traditional tight end style. And then he's still got Rob Gronkowski on the roster, which I guess I can't fault the guy for keeping future Hall of Famer around, but this will be the second year Gronk's retired in a row and the 3rd overall. So it might be time. To let that one go.
I think Gronk is more of a team mascot for Judd at this point than an expected contributor.
I think that's what he'd be in the real NFL too.
I don't think this tight end room is as bad as the rank, though. I see a lot of guys who are going to play. Knox is going to play heavy snack. Cade Otten is the starting tight end in Tampa Bay, for better or for worse, with Baker Mayfield. Hayden Hurst is going to play heavy snaps in Carolina. We don't know how that passing attack is going to shake out with a new coach, new quarterback. We don't know who he's going to target. And Taysom Hill finds ways to contribute, not always receiving, but he finds ways to put up points. So it's possible he can cobble together more points than what the dynasty rank suggests.
Yeah, it's true what you said about the tight ends. There's more value than you would expect from the 12th ranked room. There's guys that are going to play, and they might not put up eye-popping numbers, but they will put up productive numbers. At number 5, we have Flinch50 managing Festivus.
But out of that, a new holiday was born. A Festivus for the rest of us. Festivus is back! The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances. I got a lot of problems with you people. Now, you're going to hear about it. And now, as Festivus rolls on, we come to the feats of strength.
And to start us off with Flinch's team, we have the running back room, highlighted by Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, and Derrick Henry. Just 3 absolute monsters to lead off this room. Some depth pieces, Isaiah Pacheco, Tajay Spears, Zamir White, and then some backups and handcuffs below that. Breece Hall and Ramondre, to start off with 2 young guys, is a great core for your room. And then to also have Derrick Henry, who's older but still just getting an absolute monster-sized workload every week, is a luxury.
This room is loaded with production, upside, everything that you're looking for. He's the number 2 overall running back room in the league with good reason. Even some of the lower end guys, Spears has flashed in the preseason. Zamir White, we'll see if he takes some of the heavy workload from Josh Jacobs this year. Banakanda is going to make that team. Spillers flashed a lot more than last year. Chris Evans is going to have a role in Cincinnati. Kyron Williams is going to have a role for the Rams. Even Ahmed has looked good in the preseason for the Dolphins. All of these guys are potential contributors up and down this lineup.
Yeah, like you said, there's some solid depth pieces here. Guys that have roles to start off the season, will be active on game days, and have chances to move up if they see any injuries or poor production in front of them. And that's the kind of guys you want to fill out the back end of your running back room in the best ball leagues.
With the way the rest of his roster is constructed, he's going to need production up and down this group. Going to probably get a lot of his flex points from running backs this year.
I'd say that's a likely situation. Normally we jump right to the next highest rank, but since you pointed out that a lot of the flex points are going to be coming from the running back, that's probably because his wide receiver room is ranked 12 and it's not the strongest group. Now at the top, he's actually pretty good. He's got Devontae Adams, George Pickens, Terry McLaurin. But after that, there's a sharp drop off. We have Rashee Rice, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Chase Claypool, who was just acquired recently, Marvin Jones, and Samari Toure. And that's the end of the list right there. It's actually a fairly shallow room as well as being fairly top heavy.
Exactly. Devontae Adams is locked into heavy production. Pickens looks to be an ascending player, but he's still competing with Deontay Johnson there for targets. McLaurin picked up a toe injury. He's competing with Josh Doctson. And then we don't know what we're going to get out of the rest of these guys. Rice looks like he's buried on the depth chart. Peoples-Jones now has to deal with Elijah Moore, who's being schemed touches. He's dropping down to 4th or 5th in the pecking order there. Claypool, who knows? He didn't look very good after the Bears picked him up last year. It's possible with the full offseason, he can come into some kind of role. Marvin Jones is 136 years old. It's a very thin group at wide receiver with no guaranteed production outside of the top 3 guys.
Yeah, so like you said, most weeks you'll end up getting the flex spots from the running back room as opposed to the wide receiver room. But the good news is you only have to start 2 wide receivers, and between Adams, Pickens, and McLaurin, you're going to get some pretty good numbers on a week-to-week basis.
It's not impossible to win with a team built this way. It's not the traditional way. Well, I shouldn't say that. This was the traditional way to build a dynasty team 10 years ago. In this scoring format, wide receivers get a little more juice. So typically you want to be a little stronger at wide receiver. It's not impossible. He's a contender for a reason. He's going to get points, whether they come by running back or receiver. He'll still score enough to win most matchups based on Dynasty Daddy's projections.
And some of those flex points might come from the tight end room, which is ranked 5th. And as we discussed in our draft recap episode, he hammered the position this year. We talked about Kincaid and Shoemaker and Brenton Strange that he took in the draft, but he's adding to Everett, Ogwebanam, and Logan Thomas. We've got some starters there. We've got some guys that project pretty well, like Kincaid and Everett. And then some Thomas, when healthy, has been great, but he hasn't been able to stay on the field. Ogwebanam had the hype last year, but didn't really come through. But taking the group as a whole, you should have enough production to fill out at least your tight end spots and possibly some flex spots as well.
The group has a lot of dynasty value. I'm not sure about production to be seen with Kincaid and Schoonmaker and Strange. Everett, he's the only guy that's locked into a role that we can kind of forecast at this point. Logan Thomas, if he's healthy, looks to be the starter in Washington. But again, he's struggled the last couple of years to stay on the field. He's currently injured, so we'll see how that goes. The room could be a concern if these rookies don't develop and come into roles earlier than expected.
Yeah, Kincaid is the highest ranked guy, and a lot of people seem to think that Kincaid will have that early season or early career production this season. So the other position of relative strength on this team is quarterback. Quarterback rank of 4 on Dynasty Daddy, with Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson as his 2 starters.
He's got 2 top 12, I'd say, where we put Watson, somewhere in that top 12-ish range. So that's really 2 elite quarterback options and then a bunch of backups. Ideally, you would have 3 quarterbacks as a potential contender. He certainly has a lot of options. There's a lot of avenues where he can get a 3rd quarterback based on all the backups he has rostered at the moment. But right now, it's just the 2 stars leading the room.
Yeah, you've got those 2 guys who, as you said, are top 12 options. Everyone is excited for Lamar in the new offense, seeing if he could put together another season like his MVP campaign where he led the league in touchdown passes and still keep that rushing upside. And Deshaun Watson, strange to say for a quarterback of his tenure in the league, but a lot of it seems like projection at this point. the community appears to be projecting that he gets back to the level he was at those seasons in Houston.
He certainly didn't look like it at the end of last year. Now, there were a few extenuating circumstances involved in that, obviously, but a full normal offseason has a lot of people projecting him to bounce back.
So the rest of this quarterback room, your standard backups, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that Hooker, O'Connell, and Bennett are all rookies in situations where they might have a decent chance to start this year. There's some turmoil or injury at the position in front of them that could provide an opening and an opportunity. And if that situation does come to pass, he's got that third starting quarterback at a pretty sharp discount. And the last thing to cover here, as always, draft capital. Dynasty Daddy rank of number 9. Flinch has traded away his second and third round picks in 2024, but he did retain his first, so he's got that most important piece still, even if there's some missing in the middle.
Right, he's still got that flexibility. If things go really poorly, he still controls his own destiny. Or if he's competitive, he can pick up a big piece in season, maybe another wide receiver. I'm sure there'll be players on the market at some point during the season.
At number 4, we have mellcrisp managing the Moops.
I'm so sorry, it's the Moops. The correct answer is the Moops.
With a projected record of 17-11 and an 88% chance to make the playoffs. Mel's got a pretty strong team here. His worst position rank across the board is number 5 and his strongest is number 1. So let's start with that number 1 group, his quarterback room. Josh Allen, Justin Fields, Geno Smith, Mac Jones, and the crowning jewel, Sean Clifford. Sam Clifford. I don't know who Sam Clifford would even be. Obviously, Josh Allen, one of the most dynamic quarterbacks. Justin Fields coming off of his breakout season last year. This is one heck of a quarterback group.
You've got the dream quarterback room here. 2 top 8 quarterbacks, 2 more quality starters. Is Mac Jones a quality starter? I mean, as your quarterback 4, yes, that's a pretty good quarterback.
2
4.
more starters.
But it's a great group overall. You can't ask for much more than this in a 12-team Superflex league.
The impressive thing about this quarterback room is that he's got the consistency and the high-end explosiveness that you want for best ball. Allen and Fields are both capable of putting up the number 1 overall score in a week. Geno is a very consistent player week to week. And I think a lot of people have the belief that Mac will look better than he did last year, this year, closer to what he had in his rookie season with an actual offense and an actual offensive coordinator.
Right. Can't be worse with an actual legitimate offensive coordinator this year.
Yeah.
I think the biggest problem with this quarterback group is someone was dumb enough to trade him Justin Fields. What kind of an idiot would do that?
Listen, you could have had almost this exact quarterback room. You had Justin Fields and Geno Smith last year. So when we get to your team and your quarterback rank is significantly lower, you have no one to blame but yourself.
I don't want to talk about it.
From quarterback, we're going to slide on over to the tight end room because the tight end room has a rank of number 3. So we're not far behind that quarterback group in terms of overall value. Here, the highlight is Kyle Pitts, Greg Dulcich, and then we drop off a bit to guys who are in one of 2 buckets, either too young or not the primary guy anymore, but will still provide some weeks. Kyle Pitts last year, not quite as impressive as his rookie year. He had the injury problems and the entire offense struggled in the passing game, but with Desmond Ridder this year, things are looking at least better than with Mariota. So we'll see how that one plays out over the course of the year. Tight end room could easily go south if Mel gets a little bit of bad luck here. If we have another repeat of last year with Pitts having some injury problems, that offense struggling in the passing game like it did under Mariota, and Dulcich seems to have been at least relegated to no longer being the 1A, Troutman coming in and Sean Payton taking over that offense, we could see some problems there, but it could also easily go the other way. And if each guy takes a step forward and builds on the positive things that have happened the last couple of years for them, we could easily see this tight end room be one of the stronger ones in the league.
I think you nailed it. Kyle Pitts is the key to this entire room. He's got the third ranked room and value. But if Kyle Pitts doesn't go back to his rookie year promise, if he looks more like he did last year, this tight end group is going to struggle. He doesn't have a lot of depth production-wise. He's got some young guys on the bench, Tucker Kraft, Noah Gray. I mean, these guys are reserves, and it's not like even if they get into the starting lineup, they're not going to replicate the starter's workload. If something happens to Kelsey, you're not going to see Gray become a 1-for-1 replacement, right? He's not going to suddenly catch 100 passes. I mean, Hooper's already fallen behind Michael Mayer. Tanyan's behind Kmet, who they just gave a big extension to. You can only expect so much from the tight end twos on a bunch of teams. You know, they're definitely worth rostering, especially with the depth and breadth of our league and the amount of tight ends that are necessary. Anyone that's getting any snaps is worth rostering. You can't count on these guys for any sort of consistent week-to-week production. So for him to deliver on the promise of the number 3 ranked tight end room, he really needs Pitts to have a superstar type season that he certainly looked capable of as a rookie.
The other problem is, though, even if Pitts does have that top-end season, I don't know who's filling his tight end 2 role most weeks if Dulcich really has lost that starting job.
At least he's got a lot of bodies there. There are options. I mean, any of these guys can luck into a touchdown enough to get you in the starting lineup with the juiced tight end scoring. So if Dulcich doesn't become a every week starter, you'll probably need to make a move to get somebody else.
Well, and the good news is that if he does need to make a move, he's got value at the wide receiver and running back room. So let's move over to those. At wide receiver, he's got Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, and Cooper Kupp as his starting trio. Well, what a heck of a group that is. The depth pieces are not the same name recognition, but he's got guys that will get in and get snaps. He's not going to lack for flex options there on a week-to-week basis.
The wide receiver group is very top heavy. I mean, he's got 3 of maybe the top 5, 6 in ADP and redraft ADP. These are all wide receiver ones, all on the same team.
All first-round picks in ADP right now.
It's a very talented top end of the wide receiver room. The rest of it, like you said, he's got some vets that are probably going to contribute. Zay Jones had a good year last year. Ridley knocks him down the pecking tree a little bit, but he's still going to draw targets. Odell Beckham Jr. got a lot of money from the Ravens. I mean, they're going to feed him if he can stay out on the field. KJ Osborne's going to have a role. Mecole Hardman's going to have a role.
He's got the Giants' own Bryce Ford-Wheaton, who unfortunately just went on IR too.
Yeah, I don't think he was expecting a major contribution from Bryce Ford-Wheaton. Well, you know. If he was, then he wouldn't be in the contender group.
Like you said, it's a top-heavy group, but I think that he's got enough depth and guys that start on the real NFL teams to fill in those flex spots a lot of the time.
These top 3 are enough to carry the entire receiver room. These 3 are probably going to outscore most people's top 6 receivers
easily
on a week-to-week basis. So,
and if he doesn't get all the flex spots filled from his wide receivers, the running back room also features a good amount of depth and could probably do the trick for him. He's got Tony Pollard, Rashad White, DeAndre Swift, and Tank Bigsby as his top guys. Algier, who is coming off a 1,000-yard season, but now behind Bijan. Deuce Vaughn, the rookie who's somehow getting all this camp hype. Sean Tucker, Jerick McKinnon, who apparently is Patrick Mahomes' favorite target, despite being a running back. And there's some solid depth there. Zach Moss is still injured, but I know he was your guy for all of eternity.
Yeah, and he might be the Colts guy if they trade Jonathan Taylor away and don't get a running back.
And I mean, even Eric Gray on his team looks like he's got the number 2 job or possibly number 3 job in New York, but Saquon hasn't exactly played every game of his career, so Gray could even find his way into more work.
It's a very deep, talented group. This is what you're looking for. He's got high-end talent in Tony Pollard. Some idiot decided it would be a good idea to trade Tony Pollard to the defending runner-up of our league. Always a good idea to make the best teams better.
You mentioned you didn't like GeorgiaMike trading him Cooper Kupp, but it seems like you're a bigger problem than that.
Yeah, that's very possible. I really should not be sabotaging my own chances of winning by making the other teams around me at the top better. Probably a bad strategy. We'll see how it works.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton.
But he's got talent besides that. I mean, Rashad White is walking into an every down role. And if he doesn't, he's got Sean Tucker on the bench if he starts stealing carries away. He's got DeAndre Swift, who's been granted new life in Philadelphia.
That Eagles backfield is uncertain enough that Swift could be, he could easily, if he gets all the work and stays healthy, be a top 15 guy, or he could get none of the work and or not be healthy and be absolutely useless.
We still don't know how that backfield's going to shake out, but you got to believe that the talent of DeAndre Swift will win out. I think he's probably the most physically gifted running back in that room. Every time he's been on the field in Detroit, the few times he was able to be healthy on the field, he was highly efficient. So I think if he's out there, even if it's in a limited capacity, he can still put up points. Even Tank Bigsby, who's already worked himself into a timeshare, looks like with ETN. A lot of times these rookies kind of chip away as the season goes. We may see even more Tank down the stretch. Algiers going to have a workload, maybe not as heavy as last year. I don't expect them to give Bijan 500 carries. And Arthur Smith definitely wants to run the ball 500 times. So Algiers is going to get his touches. There's talent. There's contributors up and down. He's got 10 guys that could get into a weekly lineup here. That's exactly what you're looking for in best ball.
Lastly, looking over the draft capital, we see that we have a rank of number 5 with first round pick, second round pick, and 2 third round picks in 24. No fourth, but that extra third round pick coming from someone.
Oh God, why? No.
You really got to stop helping him out. That extra third round pick bumps you up a little bit. It helps to move from the fourth to the third, but all his own picks intact essentially.
Mel is the first of this upper tier of contenders. He checks all the boxes, everything you're looking for. He's got depth. He's got high-end talent. He's got more than enough quarterbacks. He's got draft picks, flexibility if he needs to go get more players. This is everything you're looking for in a contender. He's got a deep and talented team, unfortunately for the rest of us who are trying to compete against him. I don't want to talk about how good his team is anymore.
Yeah, like you just said, he's one of the top teams here. This upper tier, the remaining 4 teams, if you include Mel's team, all have a projected record of 17-11 and a chance to make the playoffs between 88 and 92%. These 4 teams are grouped fairly closely according to Dynasty Daddy, and Mel's certainly right in the middle of this tier, even if he's technically the 4th team.
Right. There's a clear divide between these last 4 teams that we're going to cover right now.
Moving on to number 3, we have JMC 2313 managing JMC 2313.
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Get a team name. You're killing me.
Also with a projected record of 17-11 and an 88% chance to make the playoffs. So JMC has constructed a little bit of a different team than the rest of the league. Most of the guys that we've looked at in the contender category have focused on depth across at least a few positions. JMC has gone a slightly different route and has tried to maximize his starters. He's got one of the lowest overall team values, as in the total sum of all the assets isn't as high as many of the other teams, but he's still projected at a very high record and a high points total. And that's on the strength of these extremely talented starters, as we'll see as we get into the positions here. I want to start over at tight end because he's got the number 1 tight end, Travis Kelce. His tight end rank is number 5, basically on the strength of Kelce alone, because the other guys in the room are Darnell Washington, the rookie, Mike Gesicki, recently signed with New England, and Jonnu Smith, recently departed from New England.
This is all Travis Kelce. Tight end rank should be 1, even with Kelce by himself, if you're looking at projected points. Kelce will outscore pretty much everyone else's 2 starting tight ends alone. So anything he gets from Gesicki or Jonnu or even Darnell Washington is just a bonus for him. He really doesn't need anything else from tight end. Travis Kelce is arguably the biggest difference maker at any position in fantasy right now. And in this league with 2 tight ends and juiced tight end scoring, he's one of the highest scoring players in the league.
having Kelsey on the roster affords him the ability to not ignore the rest of the tight end room, but to focus less on it. It'll be nice if he gets contributions from those other guys, but he's not going to depend on it the same way some of the other teams will depend on contributions from their other tight ends. Moving over to his wide receivers, we see another group here, which is top heavy. We got Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, DJ Moore, Deebo Samuel, and Amari Cooper. All of these are at least wide receiver 2s or wide receiver 1s, and all of them project to be extremely productive again this year. After that, there's a pretty big drop-off. We've got Jacoby Myers, Richie James, and then after that, there's another big drop-off to Isaiah McKenzie, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Dwayne Eskridge, and a bunch of guys who probably won't play at all.
This is a really good wide receiver room. You've got elite talent all over the place. Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver 1. T. Higgins, points per game, was a wide receiver 1 last year. I know he got skewed by missing a couple games or not really participating despite being active. DJ Moore, now in Chicago, based on what we've seen in the preseason, looks like he's going to maybe finally have a real, true explosive season. Deebo is always a threat for 1 million all-purpose yards. Amari Cooper was a wide receiver 1 last year. Now he's got Watson back for the full season. It's a very, very good wide receiver team. And it's not super old all in. You know, Higgins, Moore, these guys are still young. Debo's right in the prime. Cooper and Hill are getting up there, but they're still giving you wide receiver 1 seasons. So it's not like we're expecting them to fall off hard. They're not in their mid-30s. And then even the bench, he's got a little bit of talent here. Jacoby Myers is a consistent floor option. Richie James, we don't know how that Kansas City receiver rotation is going to shake out. Same with McKenzie on the Colts. It's possible that he gets some slot work there. Besides that, yeah, it's pretty barren. He's got a lot of top-end production. This whole team is built this way, where, like you said, his starters are elite starters, and then it's very thin behind that. So if his top players produce, again, if his top receivers put up numbers, he's going to win. He's going to crush people on a weekly basis if everybody plays to their ceilings.
The wide receiver room is really the strength of things as well. I mean, we don't start 5 wide receivers, so a lot of these guys are going to end up putting their points into the flex positions for him.
Yeah, it's always nice when you can throw wide receiver 1s into your flex spots, right?
All right, at the running back spot, we have a room that, again, top heavy. We got Saquon Barkley and Joe Mixon. Not a lot of depth at this position compared to the wide receiver position, but Samaje Perine, Cordero Patterson, Travion Williams, Latavius Murray. Saquon and Mixon at the top are going to see massive workloads because they're essentially the only guy available for the team, and both teams project to have pretty decent offenses. Obviously, Cincinnati's projects to be one of the best.
Right, you've got 2 RB1s locked and loaded. They're going to get all the work they can get, receiving, rushing, very thin depth charts behind Saquon and Mixon in New York and Cincinnati. And these guys are basically on 1-year deals. Mixon took a pay cut to stay. Saquon signed his 1-year tender. They're going to get all the run they can handle. Both these teams expect to be good, which means a lot of running back touches. And they're talented enough to put up big seasons with the touches. These guys have put up running back 1 seasons multiple times in the past. And they're going to carry this room. There's not much behind it, like you said. P. Ryan is the only other guy that really looks like he's going to be part of any kind of rotation. Travion Williams, we don't even know if he's going to make the team. Haskins is already off the team on IR. Patterson now behind Algier and Bijan, probably not expecting the kind of workloads he's had the last few years. And Murray, to be determined. Him and Harris are kind of fighting for that secondary role behind Cook. But yeah, he's not expecting a whole lot of production behind the top 2. They're going to have to carry the room.
How did you talk that long on Travion Williams and Cordero Patterson?
I can talk for hours about fringe guys. Would you like to hear me?
What do you think we've been doing? At quarterback, JMC has added a few new faces compared to last year's squad. He's got Daniel Jones and Brock Purdy to pair with Aaron Rodgers and a couple of backups in Jacoby Brissett and Teddy Bridgewater. He's still rostering Tom Brady in case he comes back out of retirement. But really the top end of this is Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers.
How dare you besmirch Brock Purdy, the true quarterback 1.
Not the quarterback 1 for the Niners, the quarterback 1. The
quarterback
GOAT.
overall.
Yes. We were talking about it before. Purdy has achieved a Messiah-like cult status among 49ers fans and some other people across the league. And I don't entirely understand it.
I'm convinced that JMC is only rostering Brady as a mentor for Brock Purdy. He's from the Bay Area, so it makes sense. He would want to help out his
He grew up
hometown
as a
team.
Niners fan.
Yeah, he's helping out his hometown team. It makes sense. But seriously, this last year at this time, he had the most all-in win-now quarterback room you could possibly have with Rodgers and Brady. He's done a lot of work to shore this up, and now he's got some stability and future hope. Last year, it looked like his team might fall off a cliff because he was going to have no quarterbacks. Now he's got Rodgers for at least this year, probably for next year. He picked up Daniel Jones, who just signed a big extension. He's locked in. He's not going anywhere. And Brock Purdy, who is the newly crowned quarterback one overall by me.
Yeah, it's an impressive job adding 2 starters and being able to continue to have a competitive room, despite the fact that he really came into it with one questionable asset.
He was the defending champ, and he did what he had to do to extend his window. It cost him pretty much all of his draft capital for next year. But if he wins again, I don't think he'll be complaining.
No, I doubt it. And speaking of that draft capital, he's got the draft capital rank of 11, and we can see why, where for his 24 picks, his first, second, and third round picks are all gone already. Looking into his 2025 picks, he still has those available if he decides in season he needs to shore up any one position. But for the immediate future, that capital is mostly expended already.
This roster you see now, this is his team, for better or for worse. If the big names produce, it won't matter. If he needs to go and buy some help in the middle of the season, it's tough to do without draft picks. Not impossible. And he's got 25 draft picks if he really wants to dip into them. He does have some talent that he could potentially move, some young talent, surprisingly, for an all-in contender like this. He does have some good young talent still, but it just makes it that much more difficult.
At number 2, we have Mr. Good News managing little Jerry Seinfeld.
Little Jerry Seinfeld. I named my chicken after you.
Thanks, that's very sweet, but that is not a chicken.
Oh, well, this is little Jerry Seinfeld.
Little Jerry Seinfeld.
My little Jerry.
With a projected record of 17-11 and a 92% chance to make the playoffs. This is a contending team with one extremely valuable position group, and that position group is the running back room. This is just an absolute murderer's row of running backs. We've got Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Kenneth Walker, Miles Sanders, and Alexander Madison. Man, what a lineup that is.
It would be very difficult to build this running back room in a redraft league or a startup. I mean, this is some excessive running back value here.
Yeah, I mean, we only start 2 running backs, but obviously we've got the 4 flex and the super flex. So these guys are pretty much going to be weekly locks in those flex spots.
He's starting 6 running backs. I don't know about 2. He's starting 6 every week.
Yeah, any of these guys would be your running back one for sure, and probably my running back one as well.
Even his lowest ranked starter, Madison, would be running back 1 on a lot of teams.
Yeah. It's an impressive group that he's assembled, and a lot of these guys were on the team that 2 years ago he won the title. We should say, and a lot of these guys were on that team and are left over from that. But he's added to them with some acquisitions since then, and some guys like Madison have stepped into bigger roles since then. But pretty much all these guys still have at least the role they had then.
Somehow he's managed to strengthen this running back group in the offseason, picking up Madison in that Kenny Pickett trade.
Kane Nwangu and Leonard Fournette round out the non-starters. Really, Nwangu's just a Madison handcuff at this point, and I mean, who knows if he's even the actual handcuff. Fournette maybe finds a team, maybe ends up on the waiver wire in week 2.
He doesn't need any of these other players.
No, they're not relevant.
They are bench ornaments.
Yeah. Let's jump over to the quarterback room there. Kenny Pickett and Ryan Tannehill are his number 2 and number 3, but his number 1 quarterback is Justin Herbert. Obviously, Herbert is considered a top 5 dynasty quarterback and is by far his highest value player across any position. with Herbert, Pickett, and Tannehill, you've got one guy who's going to give you top 5 numbers on a weekly basis, and then 2 guys who will fill out your other super flex position as they can.
He really needed the Kenny Pickett trade. Herbert's a stud, but it would have been tough for him to be a true contender going into the season with only Ryan Tannehill behind it and no real quarterback 3. He's got a bunch of high upside quarterback handcuffs on his bench. Sam Darnold, Taylor Heineke, Mike White. A lot of these guys could potentially see time this year and pick up some starts here or there. To be a true contender, he really needed to go out and solidify that quarterback 2 spot.
Pickett's a guy he obviously likes. He drafted Pickett and then traded Pickett away and then reacquired Pickett in this most recent trade.
Right. This is the second go around for MrGoodnews and Kenny Pickett.
That's a good
I know that feeling well.
Well, he was able to swing it back the other way. So if he regretted it, now he's happy about it.
I don't think he regrets it the first time. He got Josh Jacobs, and then Josh Jacobs had a career year.
No, that seems to have worked out pretty well for him. And Jacobs just signed, I guess it's not his franchise tender because it's technically a raise over that, but he just signed his contract.
Yep, signed, sealed, and delivered. He's ready to go. And I'm sure the Raiders will run him into the ground again.
It certainly looks that way. No, but what you mentioned with the quarterbacks here, the high upside backups on the bench is a smart thing to do in the best ball format, because you know everybody gets dinged up sooner or later. But not only that, it's guys like Darnold and Heineke who are backing up unproven quarterbacks. I consider Purdy still unproven, but guys that don't have tenure in the league at the very least.
Right. As much as we love Brock Purdy, he still hasn't even started half of a season. I know they traded away Lance. They feel like he's the guy, but the only reason they did that was because they felt comfortable with Darnold there as the backup. Just in case. Break glass in case of emergency. Heineke's very similar. You don't really know what you're going to get from Ritter. He started a handful of games at the end of last year. Wasn't amazing. And Heineke's shown he can play. Not at a super high level, but, well enough.
Yeah, journeyman backup level for sure. One that might make you a little bit upset to hear, but I think that there's a good chance we see Mike White at some point this year.
Yeah, I would say probably above average chance that Mike White plays. I got my fingers crossed that Tua can stay healthy this year, but I know the risk involved.
After that quarterback room, let's scoot over to the tight ends. Got the 10th ranked tight end group here, so not super high ranked. We have Dalton Schultz, Tyler Higbee, Noah Fant, Kylan Granson, and Brock Wright. It's not the strongest group, but Schultz and Higbee are both guys that have the skill set that works well for PPR leagues and works well for tight end premium leagues where they get a lot of catches. They don't get a ton of touchdowns. They don't get a ton of yards, but the catches pile up. And as those catches pile up, the extra catch bonuses are going to pile up with them.
I think it's not a great tight end room for dynasty value, but it is a good tight end room for production. Schultz is going to play an integral role in that offense. You got a new coach, new coordinator, new quarterback, all new receiving group. There's a chance that he emerges as one of the main targets. Not a lot of tight end competition there. Not a lot of target competition in general. We know Higbee's been a compiler in the past. The Rams have struggled to find a real number 2 option behind Kupp. Higbee's filled that role in the past. And Noah Fant, he's going to play. They like to use the 3 tight end rotation, but he plays and he's athletic and explosive enough. He doesn't need a ton of targets to put up points. Even Granson, I know the Colts have a 16-man tight end rotation.
Which you've been lamenting for this entire day.
Yeah, because I have half of them on my bench and I want to know who to keep and who to get rid of. I would not like to carry the entire Colts tight end room. That's probably probably the right decision. Granson might be the best route runner of all of them, so he's going to play.
Yeah, and like you said, that room is uncertain. It's possible that the new quarterback, somebody develops, a rapport with Richardson and maybe that's Granson and, suddenly he's seeing more playing time.
Right, same situation. New receivers, new coach, new coordinator, new quarterback. Everything's new. We don't know how it's going to shake out. There's always a chance. In this format, what do I keep saying? Just get guys who are out on the field. Get guys that are playing. I mean, anyone with a pulse, any warm body with a pulse is useful at tight end in this format. So the more you have, the more chances of players actually scoring points every week.
All right. And speaking of players scoring points every week, let's look at a position where that's not likely to happen. The wide receiver room. Sorry, that was a little rough. But compared to the rest of the team, the wide receiver room is a little bit lackluster. Highlighted by Mike Williams and Gabe Davis. We got Cortland Sutton, Brandon Cooks, and Alan Lazard rounding out the guys that are worthy of having a discussion about. You have Mike Williams and Gabe Davis at the top, who are the stereotypical boomer bust player that most best ball managers like to have, but most best ball managers don't want those as their top and best options at the positions.
As good as his running back room is, that's how weak his wide receiver room is. This is not where he's going to get the majority of his points, which is fine. You only have to start 2. He's got plenty of options. There's plenty of guys here who can put up a week to get in your lineup between Williams, Gabe Davis, Sutton. Hopefully that offense looks better. Brandon Cooks has a new life in Dallas. He always finds a way to put up decent seasons. Lazard reunited with his BFF, Aaron Rodgers, with Corey Davis now retired.
It's a tough BFF right there.
There's some target opportunities behind Garrett Wilson in that offense, especially in the red zone. Even on your team, he's got Hodgins and Slayton. Those are probably your 2 starting outside receivers. We know Waller's going to be a target hog, but I mean, you got to throw it to the receivers eventually. Those 2 guys are going to be out there.
Jones has like a 50% wide receiver target rate. He doesn't throw to them. It's bad. I get your point. There's plenty of guys here who will get you a week, and that's really what he needs. We discussed it before. His flex spots are going to be on the strength of his running back room. He's looking to fill out 2 wide receiver starters, and hopefully he gets another contributor for every now and again. Those running backs are going to have off weeks, so he's looking to fill out 3 spots at most from these guys.
Exactly. He doesn't need 6 receivers to get in his lineup every week. Hopefully not, if things go as planned. It's mostly going to be running backs. A lot of his guys have locked in heavy workloads. They're going to get touches. So he doesn't need a ton from this receiver room, which is good because we don't know how much he's going to get.
When you don't need a ton from the room, you do have the leeway to build that boom bust type of player as your lead guys, which is what he's chosen to do here. Or maybe it's accidental, is what he has done here.
Just going to assume that he did it on purpose and that he's a genius.
I mean, he is no longer the defending champ, but he is one of our 2 league champs. Got to give him the benefit of the doubt there.
Exactly.
Now, to assemble all of these players, and as you said, he's made some moves in the offseason, which brings us to the draft capital that he's expended to make those moves. He has no 24 picks remaining, not a single one. The 25 picks are still intact, so he's got that 2 years out availability if he wants to shore up in season. But for the immediate future, those picks are gone.
He's expecting to win. He's a top tier contender. Might as well empty the clip, get as many good players as you can get. The draft picks don't score you any points. He's trying to score as many points as he can. I mean, this is the all-in strategy, right? And he's definitely all in.
Yep, definitely all in. Well, you said those draft picks don't score you any points. It's actually an advantage that I don't feel like fantasy managers talk about enough. When you spend that draft capital a year early, you're essentially buying yourself that full year. You're going to get the production from those picks maybe eventually, but when you spend them ahead of time on the proven players, you're not only buying the players now, you're buying the extra year of production where that pick is just sitting on your bench. And you basically can game the system a little bit by doing that. Even doing it 2 years out is worth a lot.
Right. It's a time value of money argument. Better to have the production now than wait for potential production from a mystery box. You don't know what you're going to get. If you're getting an established player that's going to help you this year, it's worth it in my eyes.
I don't know why I felt the need to bring that up, but we'll save that one for the offseason, I think. Further discussion in that way anyways. Well, that brings us to our number 1 team. Managed by Alvernaz 13, we have Vandelay Industries.
Yellow. What Delay Industries?
No! Vandelay! Say Vandelay!
Now you're way off. Well, yeah, that's the right number, but this is an apartment.
No,
What?
say Vandelay! Say Vandelay Industries!
Yeah, no problem. How did you know who they wanted?
And you want to be my latex salesman.
Mr. Pennypacker, this is Mr. Vandelay, and you know Mr. Varnson.
Varnson.
Pennypacker.
Vandelay. Pennypacker. Varnson.
Vandelay.
With a projected record of 17-11 and a 92% chance to make the playoffs.
Now, you might ask yourself, did I choose to do the roster review on Dynasty Daddy solely because they have my team number 1? Yes,
we,
yes, I
we
did.
might ask that. Yeah.
Yes, I did. All right, let's look at this team.
I want to actually start in a place that we haven't started with a single time yet. I want to start at your draft capital. You've got 3 first-round picks in next year's draft, 3 second-round picks in next year's draft, and you have your entire class for the 2025 draft, including an additional third-round pick. For a team that is ranked number 1 overall as a contender, to also have this level of draft capital is fairly unprecedented. How'd you manage to get all this capital in here?
I think the draft picks might be pushing up the overall team value probably higher than the starters would suggest. But I mean, it's been a strategy of mine to collect picks and then trade those picks away because for one, I like making trades and draft picks are very liquid assets. Now, specific players are going to have specific markets. Not everybody's going to want to acquire every player on my team, no matter how good I think those players are. Not everyone's going to feel the same way, but draft picks, everyone will take draft picks. So I try to acquire them to facilitate other deals mostly.
Yeah, you've been one of the most active traders in our league, and you have your hands in everything, essentially. You're always looking for a deal. You're always looking to see what teams are interested in moving on. And that level of activity and attention has been rewarded in your gathering all this capital.
I enjoy trading. I don't like sitting on my hands. If there's moves to be made, I try to be the proactive party. I'm usually out there proposing trades almost every day, probably to my own detriment sometimes. I've been known to overtrade and move on from guys probably a little too quickly, but that's always been part of my operating strategy in every fantasy league I've been in. Redraft, dynasty doesn't change for me.
All right, let's move over to the starters and the position players here. I want to start at tight end, where you have the number 1 ranked tight end room, highlighted by Mark Andrews, Dallas Goedert, and David Njoku at the top, followed by Chigakonkwo, Cole Kmet, and then that tier down to Zach Ertz, James Mitchell, and Charlie Kolar. Mark Andrews is the number 1 ranked dynasty tight end. Dallas Goedert's up there in the top 5 right now. And then you've got some guys like Chig, Njoku, and Kmet who are solid starters. This is a deep tight end room with top end talent as well.
It was a conscious decision to build this way. I looked at the settings, I looked at the format. I said tight ends are very valuable and there aren't enough good ones. So I'm just going to hoard as many as I can because again, draft picks are liquid. And in this league, tight ends are liquid because everybody wants them, everybody needs them. So the more value I can collect there, better to facilitate other deals. I'm always trying to figure out how I can do the next trade.
It's an excellent point that, like you said, that tight ends are liquid. It provides you the ability to go to pretty much any team and say, hey, I have a guy that will probably be in your starting lineup on a week-to-week basis. It opens the door to begin any trade talk where you can bring a position that almost everyone needs. After the number 1 ranked draft capital group and the number 1 ranked tight end group, we move over to wide receiver where you are the number 1 ranked. Seriously, you picked this site on purpose. Room with Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jalen Waddle, Brandon Ayuk, Calvin Ridley, please make it stop, Treylon Burks, Rashad Bateman, MVS, Robert Woods, and Sterling Shepard. I hate you. Anyone who doesn't know, he's muted right now to stamp out the background noise, but he's laughing at me. Seriously though, Justin Jefferson, you got in the startup draft at the very end of, or the very beginning, I guess I should say, of the 3rd round reversal. CeeDee Lamb you acquired fairly recently in that trade with Big, and then Jalen Waddle in the trade with Mel. Jefferson's been on your team since the beginning, but adding guys like Lamb and Waddle certainly have done a lot to up the value of this room. You took the chance on Ridley when he was suspended, I believe, before he was even traded. So you've added to this room consistently, which is probably why it's that number 1 rank.
Again, this was a conscious decision, right? I wanted to invest as much of my team value as possible into the wide receiver room. I've traded away a lot of assets to get this group. Relying on this group to score pretty much all of my points because we're going to go through some other position groups that are not as promising. I have the anti MrGoodnews build, right? All my points are in wide receiver, and I have no points in running back. We'll get to that after this, but I want to bask in the glow of my amazing wide receiver room for just a little bit longer.
All right, that's long enough. It's like you said, it's the inverse of MrGoodnews. You're going to be getting all those flex spots filled by your wide receivers and your tight ends.
Yeah, I need these guys to score points every week because I'm not going to get points from other spots. And I have good starters. I don't have great depth. I have a bunch of guys that are probably going to play, but I'm not expecting any of them to make weekly lineups. It's going to be these guys at the top that pretty much have to produce every week.
Well, you said you made the conscious decision to build this way and you traded away all those other things to get those wide receivers. And let's go over to that position where you traded everybody away. You know, like Jamal Williams and Tony Pollard and Jerick McKinnon last year. All those guys, and what are we left with at the running back? With the 9th ranked running back room, which isn't terrible rank, but your top ranked guy has never taken an NFL snap, was Zach Charbonnet. You got your number 2 guy at Khalil Herbert, and then your 3rd ranked player is Jalen Warren. After that, we see some handcuffs and backups: Ty Chandler, Jordan Mason, Justice Hill, Matt Breida. Or this is the group that I like to think of as the ones you'll be trading away for 4th round picks in about a month. It's not the strongest room. It's by far your weakest position group. You have not been able to stop yourself from trading away any running back who comes into any semblance of value on your team. You got to fill out 2 running back starters every week. Hopefully, between Herbert, Warren, and Charbonnet, you'll be getting a decent, consistent carry load, but it's tough not knowing if any of those guys are even the number 1 on their team to start the year.
I'm not sure that anyone in this group is actually going to be the lead back on their team. This is not the ideal running back room for a contender. A bunch of guys who are probably going to score 0 points every week is not really what I want. Not how I intended to really build. I don't like to keep a lot of value in the running back room in the offseason, which is why you see pretty much nothing here but handcuffs. I think the 9th overall ranking is probably a bit generous. There's not really any locked-in starters here. Khalil Herbert is the closest thing to someone who may lead a timeshare. Everyone else is probably not getting very many carries every week. But the plan is to acquire more running backs in the season. There's 11 teams listed here as potential playoff teams. Now we know that math says not all 11 can make the playoff. So at some point I expect some teams to be selling, and usually the first thing that gets sold off is running backs. My plan is to acquire running backs probably with the excess draft capital that I have currently. We'll see how that goes. To be determined in season. That's the plan as of now, because I won't be able to win with this group. They're not going to score a lot of points. I'm not even sure I'll have 2 players that I can even make a lineup every week at this point.
Well, you'll have 2 in there regardless of whether you want them or not.
Right. They may just be zeros.
Yeah. We know that you want to be active on the trade market. And if anyone's going to go out there and hunt down those available running backs, it'll be you. So we'll see how much you get charged for them, but there should be the opportunities there.
The biggest thing for me is I view 99% of running backs as 1-year propositions. What are you going to get me this year? Which is why I haven't really invested in them. I will buy old running back. I don't mind the crusty old vets because I'm really only looking for production in the very short term. It's difficult to project any running back for more than 1 season outside of the very top 1% of guys, players like Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, who were just drafted in the top 10, locked into roles under a rookie contract. After that, pretty much everyone else is year to year, as we've seen in the actual NFL running back market. Guys like Saquon, guys like Jacob, Taylor, currently on the pup. Even the top end guys struggle to get paid long-term and be long-term assets that you can really bank on.
That rank of 9 there, like you said, it seems high, but you got to take into account that GeorgiaMike has essentially no running backs other than Gibbs on his team.
I would take Gibbs over all of my running backs. GeorgiaMike, if you want to trade my entire running back group for Jahmyr Gibbs, let me know. I will happily make that deal.
The last position we have to discuss here is your quarterback room. Pretty easy to discuss. It's only 3 names: Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff. You've got the up-and-coming stud, the one everybody has touted as the next big thing for years with Trevor Lawrence. Jared Goff, who's the solid veteran presence at this point. who I think we all didn't quite expect to have this level of success and shelf life in Detroit, but has apparently secured his future there. And then your middle tier of Tua. You made the trade acquiring Tua when you sent out Fields earlier this offseason. And this is really where your room is going to make or break. And it all comes back, as we mentioned before, to whether Tua stays healthy this year and if he maintains the level of success that he had when he was healthy last year.
A lot of my hopes of being a competitor hinge on the development of this room. I need Lawrence to take the next step. I need Tua to stay on the field. I need Goff to continue his steady baseline. This could very easily go wrong. Teetering a bit on the edge here with this room. I think I may have earned this kind of middle of the road rank.
You're middle of the road, but there is that upside. If Lawrence and Tua both take the step that you hope, that rank will go up, even without the backups and extraneous guys that a lot of the teams are carrying.
The no backups is purposeful. With my running back room, I can't afford to have a bunch of weekly zeros outside of that spot. Trying not to carry very many guys that aren't going to have a weekly role and no chance to score points.
All right, before we close up, I want to just point out a couple of other statistics that Dynasty Daddy has available for us here. Just to win the finals, there's a tier at the top here where Vandelay, Little Jerry Seinfeld, and the Moops are clustered between 18 and 23%. There's JMC at 16, Festivus at 10, Lord of the Idiots at 8, Human Fund at 5, and then everybody else 1% or below. It's clear what the projections are here for the likely playoff outcomes, but obviously all that's subject to change. Who knows what happens with injuries, trades, and just general player chaos and success over the course of the year.
All that goes out the window as soon as week 1 starts.
Well, that brings us to the end of our Power Ranking show. And with the end of the Power Ranking show, that brings us to the end of our off-season editions. Our plan is to come back after week 1 for our in-season editions, where we'll be reviewing the previous week, covering any trades, any exciting league events. And at that point, we'll start our series of interviews with the league managers. Hopefully, we'll be able to get everyone on. We look forward to those. Alvarez, got anything else that you want to say before we head out?
No.
Well, there you have it. See you next time, guys.
I had like a so-so date with Valerie. Now I'm number 9 on the speed dial. So I used to be 7. I dropped 2 spots.
What, she's ranking you?
Yeah, the speed dial's like a relationship barometer.